Good evening and welcome to The Strand. I'm Christina Foxley, the Director of Events, and I'm pleased to welcome authors Rachel Cohn and David Levithan here tonight to discuss their latest book, Dash and Lily's Book of Dares. Dash and Lily's Book of Dares is full of references to literature, New York spots, including The Strand, and it swells with the passion of youth. It was just announced today that the book will be made into a feature film, written and directed by Lena Dunham. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Rachel Cohen and David Levithan have written 3 books together. Their first, Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, was made into a movie starring Michael Cera and Kat Dennings, directed by Peter Solid. Their second, Naomi and Eli's No Kiss List, was named a New York Public Library book for the teen age. For their third book, Dash and Lily's Book of Dares, David wrote Dash's chapters and Rachel wrote Lily's. Although they did not pass the chapters back and forth in a red moleskin notebook, they did email them to each other without planning anything out beforehand. That's the way they work. Perhaps they can explain that a little bit. Following tonight's presentation, Rachel and David would be happy to take your questions. They will then sign copies of their books for you, which you can purchase downstairs on your way out of the store. If you can't stay through the event, we have signed books right by the pillar there, so feel free to take those. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Cohn and David Levithan to the stage.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Rachel, we're doing this again.
Here we are again.
Here we are again. All right, well, first of all, thank you so much to The Strand. We were talking about before how blown away we are to be reading here. As a kid, I came in all the time. This was my bookstore. My mom and I would come in. My eye doctor was 3 blocks away, and this would be the treat. Would be, okay, we have to go to the eye doctor, but then we'd spend like 3 hours in the Strand. So my high school self is really impressed with us right now, which is pretty cool.
My college self, I went to college on the Upper West Side, and as any New Yorker will tell you, if you ever go farther than 20 blocks from your own neighborhood, that's a shock. So coming all the way down to Union Square was like this epic trek, but I made it almost every weekend.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Thanks also to Elizabeth and to Meg from Random House who set all this and all of our tour stuff up, which has been amazing. This is the first stop on a many stop local tour. We will be doing a frequent flyer rewards program, so if you come to more than 3 of our local readings, we'll note it on your book and you will get a special prize to be determined soon. But yeah, without further ado, it seemed fitting. One of the reasons we're here, besides, of course, being stellar authors who can draw a big crowd for The Strand, is that a lot of the book takes place in The Strand. I mean, they talk about write what you know, so that's what we did.
And what we've learned from this, actually, is that we've heard all day for the last week about how great it is to place a book in The Strand, and it's made us realize there's a lot to be had from product placement. So look for that in the next book. And we're taking suggestions.
I say Rachel's next book is called Canyon Ranch. I don't know what that means. But I hear that it's nice. All right, so what we're going to do is the book came out today, so most of you have not read it, so it seems only fair to read from the beginning. I shockingly am Dash. Rachel shockingly is Lily. We have yet to do the gender. We're being taped, so I feel that I don't want to drop as many F-bombs as we usually do. The gender, and the sad thing is I can't even think of a synonym. The gender thing. So, without further ado, this is Dash. December 21st. Imagine this. You're in your favorite bookstore, scanning the shelves. You get to the section where a favorite author's books reside, and there, nestled in comfortably between the incredibly familiar spines, sits a red notebook. What do you do? The choice, I think, is obvious. You take down the red notebook and open it. And then you do whatever it tells you to do. It was Christmas time in New York City, the most detestable time of the year. The moo-like crowds, the endless visits from hapless relatives, the ersatz cheer, the joyless attempts at joyfulness. My natural aversion to human contact could only intensify in this context. Wherever I went, I was on the wrong end of the stampede. I was not willing to grant salvation through any army. I would never care about the whiteness of Christmas. I was a Decemberist, a Bolshevik, a career criminal, a philatelist trapped by an unknowable anguish. Whatever everyone else was not, I was willing to be. I walked as invisibly as I could through the Pavlovian spend-drunk hordes, the broken winter breakers, the foreigners who had flown halfway across the world to see the lighting of a tree without realizing how completely pagan such a ritual was. The only bright side of this dim season was that school was shuttered, presumably so everyone could shop ad nauseum and discover that family, like arsenic, works best in small doses, unless you prefer to die. This year I had managed to become a voluntary orphan for Christmas, telling my mother that I was spending it with my father, and my father that I was spending it with my mother, so that each of them booked non-refundable vacations with their post-divorce paramours. My parents hadn't spoken to each other in 8 years, which gave me a lot of leeway in the determination of factual accuracy, and therefore a lot of time to myself. I was popping back and forth between their apartments while they were away, but mostly I was spending time in the Strand, that bastion of titillating erudition, not so much a bookstore as the collision of 100 different bookstores with literary wreckage strewn over 18 miles of shelves. All the clerks there, with all due respect, slouch around distractedly in their skinny jeans and their thrift store button-downs, like older siblings who will never, ever be bothered to talk to you or care about you or even acknowledge your existence if their friends are around, which they always are. Some bookstores want you to believe they're a community center, like they need to host a cookie-making class in order to sell you some Proust. But the Strand leaves you completely on your own, caught between the warring forces of organization and idiosyncrasy, with idiosyncrasy winning every time. In other words, it was my kind of graveyard. I was usually in the mood to look for nothing in particular when I went to the Strand. Some days I would decide that the afternoon was sponsored by a particular letter, and would visit each and every section to check out the authors whose last names began with that letter. Other days I would decide to tackle a single section, or would investigate the recently unloaded tomes, thrown in bins that never really conformed to alphabetization. Or maybe I'd only look at books with green covers, because it had been too long since I'd read a book with a green cover. I could have been hanging out with my friends, but most of them were hanging out with their families or their what is the plural? I preferred to hang out with the dead, dying, or desperate books. Used, we call them, in a way that we'd never call a person unless we meant it cruelly. Look at Clarissa, such a used girl. I was horribly bookish to the point of coming right out and saying it, which I knew was not socially acceptable. I particularly loved the adjective bookish, which I found other people used about as often as ramrod, or chum, or teetotaler. On this particular day, I decided to check out a few of my favorite authors to see if any irregular editions had emerged from a newly deceased person's library sale. I was perusing a particular favorite, he shall remain nameless because I might turn against him someday, when I saw a peak of red. It was a red moleskin, made of neither mole nor skin, but nonetheless the preferred journal of my associates who felt the need to journal in non-electronic form. You can tell a lot about a person from the pages he or she chooses to journal on. I was strictly a college-ruled man myself, having no talent for illustration, and a microscopic scrawl that made wide-ruled seemed roomy. The blank pages were usually the most popular. I had only one friend, Thibault, who went for the grid. There wasn't any writing on the spine of this particular journal. I had to take it off the shelf to see the front, where there was written on a piece of masking tape the words, "Do you dare?" written in black Sharpie. When I opened the covers, I found a note on the first page.
I've left some clues for you. If you want them, turn the page. If you don't, put the book back on the shelf, please.
The handwriting was a girl's. I mean, you can tell. That enchanted cursive. Either way, I would have endeavored to turn the page.
So here we are. 1. Let's start with French pianism. I don't really know what it is, but I'm guessing nobody's going to take it off the shelf. Charles Timbrell's your man. 88/7/2, 88/4/8. Do not turn the page until you fill in the blanks. Just don't write in the notebook, please.
I can't say I'd ever heard of French pianism, although if a man on the street, wearing a bowler no doubt, had asked me if I believed the French were a pianistic sort, I would have easily given an affirmative reply. Because the bookstore byways of the Strand were more familiar to me than my family homes, I knew exactly where to start, the music section. It even seemed a cheat that she had given me the name of the author. Did she think me a simpleton, a slacker, a numbskull? I wanted a little credit, even before I had earned it. The book was found easily enough, that is, for someone who had 14 minutes to spare, and was exactly as I pictured it would be, the kind of book that can sit on the shelf for years. The publisher hadn't even bothered to put an illustration on the cover, just the words, French Pianism, An Historical Perspective, Charles Timbrell, then, new line, forward by Gaby Casadeas. I figured the numbers in the moleskin were dates, but then I realized that my clue giver had resorted to the age-old bookish mantra, page, line, word. I went to the page 88 and checked out line 7, word 2, then line 4, word 8.
Are you?
Was I what? I had to find out. I filled in the blanks, mentally, respecting the virgin spaces that she'd asked, and turned the page of the journal.
Okay, no cheating. What bugged you about the cover of this book, besides the lack of art? Think about it, then turn the page.
Well, that was easy. I hated that they'd used the construction "an historical" when it clearly should have been ahistorical, since the H in historical is a hard H. I turned the page.
If you said it was the misbegotten phrase, "an historical," please continue. If not, please put this journal back on the shelf.
Once more, I turned.
2. Fat Hoochie Prom Queen. 64/4/9, 119/3/8.
No author this time. Not helpful. I took French Pianism with me. We'd grown close. I couldn't leave her. And went to the information desk, where the guy sitting there looked like someone had slipped a few lithium in his Coke Zero. I'm looking for Fat Hoochie Prom Queen, I declared. He did not respond. It's a book, I said, not a person. Nope, nothing. At the very least, can you tell me the author? He looked at his computer as if it had some way to speak to me without any typing on his part. Are you wearing headphones that I can't see? I asked. He scratched at the inside of his elbow. Do you know me? I persisted. Did I grind you to a pulp in kindergarten, and are you now getting sadistic pleasure from this petty revenge? Stephen Little, is that you? Is it? I was much younger then, and foolish to have nearly drowned you in that water fountain. In my defense, your prior destruction of my book report was a completely unwarranted act of aggression. Finally, a response. The information desk clerk shook his shaggy head. No, I said. I'm not allowed to disclose the location of Fat Hoochie Prom Queen, he explained. Not to you, not to anyone. And while I am not Stephen Little, you should be ashamed of what you did to him. Ashamed. Okay, this was going to be harder than I'd thought. I tried to load Amazon onto my phone for a quick check, but there was no service anywhere in the store. I figured Fat Hoochie Prom Queen was unlikely to be nonfiction. Would that it were. So I went to the literature section and began to scan the shelves. This proving fruitless, I remembered the teen literature section upstairs and went there straight away. I skipped over any spine that didn't possess an inkling of pink. All my instincts told me Fat Hoochie Prom Queen would at the very least be dappled by pink. And lo and behold, I got to the M section, and there it was. I turned to pages 64 and 119 and found...
Going to...
I turned to the next page of the moleskin.
Very resourceful. Now that you've found this in the teen section, I must ask you, are you a teenage boy? If yes, please turn the page. If no, please return this to where you found it.
I was 16 and equipped with the appropriate genitalia, so I cleared that hurdle nicely. Next page.
3. The Joy of Gay Sex. 3rd edition. 66/12/5, 181/18/7.
Well, there wasn't any doubt about what section that would be in. So it was down to the sex and sexuality shelves, boy, that's a mouthful, where the glances were alternately furtive and defiant. Personally, the notion of buying a used sex manual of any sexuality was a bit sketchy to me. Perhaps that was why there were 4 copies of The Joy of Gay Sex, 3rd edition, on the shelves. I turned to page 66, scanned down to line 12, word 5, and found...
Cock.
I recounted, rechecked.
Are you going to cock?
Perhaps I thought cock was being used as a verb, e.g., please cock that pistol for me before you leave the vestibule. I moved to page 181, not without some trepidation.
Making love without noise is like playing a muted piano. Fine for practice, but you cheat yourself out of hearing the glorious results.